Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a field of economics that asks a pretty radical question. What if our entire model for growth is fundamentally wrong? We're talking about ecological economics, and it's a perspective that completely redefines the relationship between our economy and the planet we all live on.
At the very heart of this whole idea is one single, provocative question. It's a question that really challenges a core belief we've built our modern world on. Can we really have endless economic growth on a planet with limited resources?
All right, so first up, let's talk about the economy as we usually think of it. We've got to look at the model most of us were taught, which paints a picture of a kind of perpetual motion machine.
So take a look at this diagram. This is the classical economic model. And you'll notice how neat and tidy it is, right? You've got households providing labor and money to businesses. In return, businesses pay them salaries and make stuff, which the households then buy. It's all presented as this perfect, self-contained loop.
Yeah, the whole system is basically shown as this perpetual motion machine. Money goes one way, goods and services go the other. It seems simple, elegant, and totally independent. But take a closer look. Does it feel like anything is missing?
And here's what was missing from that neat little diagram: the planet itself. You see, in the classical model, all of our forests, our oceans, our clean air, it's all just bundled into one generic thing called land. It's treated like this infinite resource we can just pull from and a limitless dump for all our waste. And that waste? It's dismissed as an externality, basically a cost that exists outside the economic equation. Think of a factory polluting a river. The cost to clean that river isn't paid by the factory. It's an externality that society or the planet has to deal with.
And for a while, this model kind of seemed to work. But as our economies grew bigger and bigger, those externalities, all those costs we were pushing to the side, they started showing up as some serious cracks in the system. They started turning into global crises.
As globalization really sped up how much we were consuming, it became painfully obvious that this whole approach had a shelf life. The rapid decline of forests, widespread pollution, a changing climate, these were all signs that our economic engine was actually damaging its own life support system.
So, that elegant circular diagram we saw, turns out it has a massive, planet-sized blind spot. It completely ignores a fundamental law of physics. Our economy doesn't exist in a vacuum.
And all of this leads us to a radically new view, a view championed by the field of ecological economics. It's all about putting the economy back in its proper place. Now this illustrates the paradigm shift perfectly. Just look at how the human economy is no longer the whole picture. It's just one small subsystem, operating entirely inside the much larger system of the environment.
This view really just states a simple, undeniable truth. The economy pulls in materials and energy from the environment to produce things, and then it spits waste and heat back out into that same environment. So without a healthy, functioning planet providing those inputs and absorbing those outputs, that economic box, it just stops working.
And this brings us to a really core concept. Instead of just land, ecological economics talks about natural capital. This completely reframes nature. It's not some free and infinite input anymore. It's a priceless asset. It's a form of wealth that is the foundation for all other wealth.
Think of it like this. Natural capital is the planet's main bank account. It includes the things we harvest, like timber and fish. But it also includes all these critical services the planet does for free, like regulating our climate and breaking down our waste. We can live sustainably off the interest, the renewable stuff, but if we start draining the principal, well, we're heading for bankruptcy.
And the value of that interest is just staggering. A famous study back in 1994 estimated the annual value of all the services provided by Earth's ecosystems at $33 trillion. To put that in perspective, at the time, that was nearly double the entire world's gross national product. Double.
So if we change our view of the economy, it just follows that we also have to change how we measure success. For decades, the main way we've done that is with gross domestic product, or GDP.
And here's the problem with GDP. It's kind of like a company's accounting system that only tracks income but totally ignores when its most valuable assets are depreciating, or even on fire. When you cut down a forest, GDP records the money from the timber sale as a pure positive. It never subtracts the huge loss of natural capital, the lost wildlife, the soil erosion, the damage to water quality.
So, to create a more honest balance sheet, ecological economists developed something called the Genuine Progress Indicator, or GPI.
And as you can see, the two are very, very different. While GDP just measures how fast the economic engine is running, GPI tries to measure our actual well-being. It adds the value of things GDP ignores, like unpaid work, and it subtracts the costs of things like pollution, crime, and, crucially, the depletion of our natural capital.
So what happens when we actually apply this new measuring stick? What does the story of our progress look like when we account for all the costs and benefits?
Okay, this graph right here, this is the real punchline. Look at the dotted line. That's GDP per person in the US. It shows steady growth for over 50 years. That's the classic story of success. But now look at the solid line. That's the genuine progress indicator. It goes up with GDP for a few decades, but then, right around the mid-1970s, it just completely flatlines.
The implication here is pretty stark. While the country was getting busier and busier economically, the actual well-being of its citizens was stagnating. That growing gap you see between the two lines, that represents the real costs of pollution, of lost free time, of resource depletion that were essentially canceling out the financial gains.
And this is exactly why ecological economics matters so much. It provides the intellectual foundation for what we now call sustainable development, a way of making progress that doesn't steal from the future to pay for the present.
Ultimately, this whole shift in perspective forces us to ask a much deeper question. It's not just about how fast our economy is growing, but what is it growing for? Ecological economics really challenges us to stop confusing activity with achievement. It suggests that true wealth isn't just about the money in our accounts, but about the health of the natural world that underpins it all, a world we simply can't afford to bankrupt.